Hello, I'm Mike Gowing. I'm the president of ActonTV. And with me today is former Dr. Tom Beals, Ph.D. And he's retired, so he doesn't use it. But welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Mike.
Nice to have you on our program. The reason why I had Tom come on is you may recognize him from our recent town meeting. He gave a con proposal to Article 56, which was the second to last meeting of the second night. And people wanted to go home and I thought it was rushed. So I thought I'd give Tom an opportunity to actually speak to it more. And I appreciate him coming in and using this to this opportunity to explore a little more about what it was that he was saying. So anyway, with that, welcome, Tom.
Thank you.
So when you saw the article and decided that perhaps you disagreed with it or it wasn't quite what you expected it to be, what prompted you? What made you tell the other side of the story?
I thought the article was ambitious, well-meaning, but it was vague. There were ambitious goals. There were really two sections, I thought, to the article. One was the whereas parts, and they included whereas the Secretary General of the UN has warned us that climate change is going to doom us all. And then there were the be it resolved sections. And among the be it resolved sections was one that wanted to electrify buildings in Acton. Well, I had a little bit of fun at their expense and said, I don't think any building in Acton is beyond the reach of the electric utilities. What I think from previous, from select board meetings and other talk around the town is that what electrify means is to have electricity be the sole source of energy to our homes.
For our normal electric use, heating, well, I guess that would be.
Well, primarily heating, but many homes in Acton use natural gas for hot water, for heating, and for cooking. My home in Acton uses it for those. And natural gas, I think, is something that most people like, especially for cooking. But the proposal has been made to ban new natural gas connections for new construction. And I thought, well, what happens if you do that? And so I prepared this set of slides, and the one that we see on the monitor here just introduces the topic, and it brings up a new law, a next generation roadmap, which was recently signed by the governor. And it provides that an economic model should be used with scientific input on making decisions that bear on climate-related issues. And I took that requirement of the new law and applied it to the electrification question. The economic model aspect, I like that. I think that's the way to approach things. And I noted that the warrant article that I was arguing the con side to didn't propose any economic model. And so I proposed a simple economic model. And that model envisioned this scenario. We have a power plant that uses natural gas to generate electricity, and that electricity is supplied over the electric power distribution system to the home. So this home, we suppose, is also supplied with natural gas. When you use natural gas to generate electricity, there is an unavoidable power loss. It's basic thermodynamics, and you can't get around it.
Right.
And so a slide from the National Academy of Sciences gave the relative efficiencies of generating electricity from coal, from an older style natural gas, and from the newest, most efficient natural gas electricity generating methods. And the maximum was in the 60% range, and the older natural gas electricity generating machinery was in the 40% range. So I said, what happens, let's take the simple scenario of 50% efficiency in conversion of natural gas to electricity.
For a financial model or for an economic model.
Yes, for an economic model. And so now we envision two scenarios. In one case, all the heating in the home, and an important point here, we're just talking about heat in the home. We're not talking about the running your computers and that sort of thing. But the predominant usage of energy to the home is heat. And the speaker for the previous article emphasized that.
Right.
And so if we generate some given amount of heat in the home from natural gas, that has as a consequence an amount of CO2 that's produced. If we produce that same amount of heat in the home using electricity generated in the power plant from natural gas supplied to the power plant, at the 50% conversion, twice the CO2 is released as the CO2 burned in the home.
Okay. So, but if I can interject, I think the article itself said that, well, that's assuming gas power plant supply. If it was renewable energy supply, such as solar or wind or I can't think, nuclear or water or whatever it might be.
Hydroelectric.
Hydro, thank you, I couldn't think of the word. That they can be other sources of that input into that model that you've got up there.
Right.
So what's your response to that? I mean, because you're doing this with just gas.
Yeah, it is a simple model. And models can always be refined so that they more accurately reflect the real situation in the real world. And so in the upper right panel, ISO New England, which is the grid operator for New England, they have a very nice website that gives almost in real time the energy mix that is supplying the electricity that they're providing over the grid. On the day I took this screenshot, natural gas was 55% of the energy source for the grid. And so if only half of the energy from the grid is coming from natural gas, then the excess of CO2 from the electricity supply gets reduced. But as long as natural gas is any proportion, as long as any fossil fuel source is any proportion of the generated electricity supply, excess CO2 is being produced relative to burning the gas in the home where the heat is required.
Right. BTUs.
BTUs. And the Energy Information Administration, which is a handful to say, also has just an enormous variety of information on their website.
Right.
And that larger graph is a depiction of anticipated energy sources out to 2050. Now the warrant article would have Acton have all its electricity from renewable sources by 2030. But they don't say how we're going to get there.
Right, right.
And nothing I've seen suggests that there is any way that Acton can truly get to renewable energy by 2030.
You're talking about solely.
Solely renewable. Yeah. Now, what we could do is buy our way such that all the power that we're getting comes from renewable sources, but I think what that means is that some other community that can't afford to buy their way into it is now using the non-renewable power that Acton tells itself it's not using. Well, energy is fungible, and the fact that we can tell ourselves maybe and pat ourselves in the back that we're all renewable isn't really changing what's going on.
On that particular graph, when I look at that box, the upper right-hand box, and I see that 7% is renewables, and the list of solar, landfill gas, wind, burning refuse, and wood only represents 7%. Where does the other 93% come from? And I guess the argument against coal or fuel oil or natural gas as being creators of greenhouse gas and other assorted issues, leaks and whatnot, what happens when it leaks into the atmosphere. Not unburned, it still has an effect on CO2. Sure. But I think we're a long way away from getting that we can supply 100% of our electricity through renewables. Even if you include in nuclear, which is another 26%, that's still only a third of the need, at least by my math. And I'm not sure that nuclear is going up in use. Nuclear, I think, is going down in use. They're closing nuclear power plants. So I'm not sure how we're going to get there, which is what intrigued me about your graph. And again, end of the second night, I get why the citizens just wanted to get home. So, but I wanted you to have a chance to really kind of explain this, because I do think it's important, and I appreciate you coming on to spend your time and do this. Anyway, so how do we get there from here? You know, what would you suggest? Now you're got this mapped out to 2050. If Acton is going to be a model, as I told you earlier, we pioneered the landfill solar farm. We were the first community to do it in the state. So we get that, but that's not able to be done in every community. And how does every community in the Commonwealth get to the kind of level that we're at, or even further, if there's no available electricity?
One of the places we could go from here is to go back to the original impetus for the whole question, and that is, we've had an opinion from the Secretary General of the UN and others who have promoted, and I guess this is now a searchable phrase or a meme, climate doomism. Well, what if climate doomism is unwarranted?
You realize they made that because no one can say it.
There is also an abundant literature out there that doesn't get paid attention to. And one Acton citizen, who I thank, called my attention to a book that was on my reading list and has since gone mostly into my read list, Stephen Koonin, Unsettled, wherein he was an official in the Obama administration, and he deconstructs all the arguments, the climate doomism, and says, you know, it's not that bad. And I think if Acton really wants to be a model, which I think it does, I would ask first that Acton become fully informed on the real issues, the real hazards. What are the hazards to greenhouse gases? Are they as extreme as they've been portrayed? And I think many reasonable people's answer is no. So that's where I'd start.
Well, that's part of, in any debate, that you have each side put forth their merits of what it is that why they're making the claim. I think that the UN is looking at it globally. So you have many countries in the world, third world countries, that are, still burning coal as home fires.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's not all things being equal, it is an unequal distribution. However, the United States, for the population size, uses much more energy than our population would.
Yes, we do, and our productivity is correspondingly greater.
Mm-hmm.
We're not wasting that energy.
Mm-hmm.
There, as you say, India and China are on course to burn more coal well into the future. Africa needs an power that is not polluting. A lot of Africa burns wood for fuel. It creates indoor air pollution. They constantly have to monitor their fires.
Mm-hmm.
Another book, Michael Schellenberger's, and I don't recall the name of the book, but it is a litany of poor decisions that have been made with the best of intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And so another direction that I would hope that Acton would go would be to look at these public policy decisions and ask, were they the best decisions? Are there mistakes that we can learn from?
Right.
How can we best advocate for people who are less fortunate and not impose solutions on them, but ask what's available to them and what would make their lives better in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. Don't need to go 50 years out
Mm-hmm.
to improve the lives of people now. And that can be done, and climate doomism is getting in the way.
We're already moving more towards renewables. It's just from the slides that I've seen, that's going to be a long time coming. You don't go from 7% to 100% overnight.
Right.
Anyway, was that all of your slides that you...
I had a final... I was, again, a little bit hard on the previous article. I characterized it as tactics without strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And I meant it. I think if you are operating in these big picture areas, if you're not using all the data that's available to you, if you're not making models, if you're not presenting this almost utopian goal without the nitty-gritty, how are we going to get there, you're not going to get there.
Right.
And there's a larger point, actually, and that's the bottom panel on this slide. I have a background in biology and biotechnology, and I hoped to make the point that natural gas is not necessarily a fossil fuel. We use feedstocks from oil for a great variety of our industry, and if we stop using oil, we'd like to have a replacement for those feedstocks.
Mm-hmm. Oil is used in macadam on every roadway.
Yeah, sure.
So
and yet, so in the bigger picture, as we think forward, not just 50 years, but a couple of 100 years, if humanity survives, which I hope we do, we will transition away from fossil fuels. And there's a great deal that can be done now. And let me give just one quick example. Battery technology, storage of electrical energy is an unsolved problem.
Right.
There are solutions that are expensive, capital intensive, and don't work well, but it's an unsolved problem. And biofuels, biogeneration of turning the sunlight that powers photosynthesis into a current account supply of electricity, call it, is hasn't had much attention paid to it, and I would like to see that in the discussion much more than it has been.
Right.
So, but that's a whole nother topic.
Right. Right. No, well, I think you make some very good points, Tom. I'm very happy that you came on to talk about this. I do appreciate your time. And with that, I guess we'll sign off. But I will give you the last word. Do you have anything else that you wanted to include in this?
Thank you very much, Mike, and I think we've said it well.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
All right.